Picture this. You're a researcher named Iris. You've just started your PhD, and your absolute passion is researching the invisibility of Creole-speaking students in the schools of northern Western Australia. Your work has the very real power to shape how these students learn, how they communicate, and how they participate in society. I mean, this is vital, real-world stuff. But there's a massive hurdle standing right in your way. How do you actually make this invisible world visible to the global academic community? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into that critical bridge between conducting transformative research and actually getting it out there to the world. We'll be looking closely at the Applied Linguistics Association of Australia, or ALAA, workshop on scholarly publishing, just to see exactly how early career researchers can navigate this whole complex journey. Here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll start with number 1, language, life, and ALAA. Then 2, decoding the publishing process. 3, the architecture of an article. 4, gatekeepers and growing pains. And finally, 5, building a global community. All right, section 1, language, life, and ALA. Let's jump right into this first section to see why a hands-on academic workshop like this is so desperately needed for emerging scholars right now. Because, applied linguistics, it isn't just theory sitting in a dusty textbook. It's about real life. Think about researchers like Iris, who we just talked about, or Jonathan, another workshop participant who studies translanguaging with humanitarian entrants when they first resettle. These scholars are doing heavy lifting work that profoundly shapes human identity and social participation. But doing the research is really only half the battle. If those incredible findings just sit on a hard drive, the people they are trying to help remain totally invisible. So the big question becomes, how do we actually give these essential stories a platform? Enter the ALAA workshop. Led by Dr. Bronwyn Dyson over at the University of Sydney, this workshop provides a totally vital, supportive space for postgraduate students, language teachers, and academics. Its entire purpose is to demystify the complex and, let's be honest, often intimidating practical realities of turning your raw research into published scholarly articles. It's custom-built for an audience that might be completely new to the publishing arena, and it transforms them from solitary, stressed-out writers into confident, published voices in applied linguistics. Moving on to section 2, decoding the publishing process. Finding the right home for your work is huge, so let's figure out where specific research actually belongs out there in the academic ecosystem. There is a stark contrast between generalized and specialized targeting. A critical early hurdle for literally any novice writer is targeting the appropriate journal. For instance, if your research focuses broadly on language acquisition, a generalized journal like Language Learning might be an amazing fit. But if you've written a highly specialized, deeply focused piece on language policy, sending it to a niche journal that specifically covers assessing writing, that's a recipe for instant rejection. You absolutely have to do your homework. You need to look up the editors, read the journal's scope, and understand exactly who their audience is. And if you don't do that homework, you're going to run headfirst into a wall known as the desk reject. This is when an editor outright rejects your manuscript before it even reaches the peer reviewers. It usually happens for a few really common reasons. Maybe it's a poor fit with the journal's topic, or you wildly exceeded the word count, or you're missing crucial elements like ethics approvals. So the main takeaway is that you can often avoid this dreaded desk reject just by aligning your topic carefully. Oh, and here's a massive pro tip from the workshop. Always submit a strong, carefully crafted cover letter. A solid cover letter establishes your credibility, assures the editor you haven't submitted the paper anywhere else, and explains any specific nuances about your work. Okay, section 3, the architecture of an article. So once you've found the perfect home for your research and bypass that initial editor's filter, how do you actually structure the article itself to guarantee success? Let's decode it. In the workshop, Dr. Dyson introduces a brilliant, absolute lifesaver of a concept from a scholar named John Swales, known as rhetorical moves. If you're a postgrad student staring at a blank, blinking cursor, writing an entire article feels completely overwhelming. But a move is simply a segment of text that performs a very specific communicative function. Thinking in terms of these moves brilliantly breaks down this massive, overwhelming writing task into manageable, functional building blocks. You aren't just typing words hoping they sound smart. You are fulfilling specific structural expectations that the reviewers are actively looking for. It's essentially an elegant 3-step dance for writing an introduction. Move 1, you establish the territory by making broad generalizations about your topic. Move 2, you establish a niche by identifying a specific glaring gap in the current literature. And move 3, You clearly present your own present work and show exactly how it fills that specific gap. During the workshop, participants actually evaluate drafts of real articles to see how well these moves are executed in practice. And they always find that the strongest drafts are concise, direct, and explicitly follow this exact logical progression from the broad territory right down to the specific research questions. And what's truly fascinating is how universal these building blocks actually are. When you examine studies, like one that compared Thai national journals with international journals in applied linguistics, it reveals that the frequencies of these structural moves are highly similar globally. Now, sure, the nuanced ways authors establish credibility or point out those research gaps can definitely vary depending on the local cultural context, but the underlying architecture, it remains a totally standardized, expected framework that helps reviewers easily tick off their boxes and understand your core logic. Which brings us to Section 4, Gatekeepers and Growing Pains. Because even with the perfect structure, publishing is tough. The writing part is really only half the battle. The rest is deeply psychological. It is so vital to validate the emotional toll of academic publishing for absolutely everyone involved. The workshop literature dives into the work of Habibi and Hyland, highlighting the incredible risks, rewards, and intense pressures on junior scholars today. It actively normalizes what they call affective struggles. We are talking about the late-night anxiety, the crushing self-doubt, the fear of critical feedback, and the sheer terror of facing rejection from academic gatekeepers. If you ever feel like an absolute imposter when submitting a paper, this workshop is here to assure you, you are definitely not alone. It is a completely normal, expected part of the scholarly journey. Actually, this brings us to a concept that completely shatters a very common misconception. We call it the myth of linguistic injustice. This is the idea that native English speakers just breeze through academic publishing, while English as an additional language writers suffer all the burdens. Well, the research presented in the workshop entirely debunks this polarization. It proves, without a doubt, that native English writers face the exact same isolation, imposter syndrome, and anxiety as non-native writers. In fact, native speakers can sometimes face even more pressure to have supposedly perfect writing, making them terrified to ask for help because they're afraid of losing credibility. When it comes down to it, academic writing is essentially everyone's second language. And then there's the dreaded review process. Getting a revise and resubmit decision or receiving a particularly harsh critique, which we all jokingly blame on the infamous reviewer too, is practically universal. As Starfield and Paltridge note, the vast majority of articles simply do not get accepted on the very first try. But learning to respond constructively, objectively, and politely to this feedback, that is a massive resilience skill. The workshop literally teaches you to use a table to methodically address every single reviewer comment, even the ones that completely miss the point of your work, while keeping your tone respectful and your arguments strictly logical. Finally, Section 5, Building a Global Community. We've talked a lot about the struggles, but let's take a look at how publishing is actually a huge community-building endeavor, rather than just some solitary ordeal you have to survive. The ALAA workshop is proof that you don't have to write in a vacuum. Participants walk away with so much more than just publication skills. By engaging in these collaborative workshop models, researchers immediately see increased productivity and finally overcome the agony of writing procrastination. They deepen their collegiality, building these incredibly supportive global networks that last for years. And honestly, one of the best parts is the train-the-trainer benefit. Academics can take these very workshop models right back to their own home institutions, empowering an entirely new wave of novice authors in their own local context. It creates this beautiful ripple effect that pushes applied linguistics forward on a global scale. So we return right back to where we started. By joining this vibrant community and learning the unspoken rules of publishing architecture, researchers like Iris, with her essential focus on Creole-speaking students, are truly equipped to make their stories visible. They are no longer isolated. They are empowered. They learn that the emotional growing pains are totally normal and that structure is their greatest ally. Which leaves us with one final provocative question for all the emerging scholars out there listening. Once you master these tools, what invisible world will your research reveal to us? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. Keep writing, keep sharing, and we'll see you next time.